From The Australian, here's what's on the front. I'm Kristen Amiot. It's Monday, January 19, 2026. Members and senators will descend on Canberra on Monday for an emergency parliamentary sitting. They'll debate reworked gun control and hate speech legislation after support for the government's proposed omnibus bill waned. Today, National Editor Dennis Shanahan on why the government still has a shot at redemption.
My job as the Australian Prime Minister is to act in the national interest.
A list of people wanting a Commonwealth Royal Commission into the Bondi attack is growing by the day.
But Anthony Albanese is still resisting cascading pressure to greenlight a Royal Commission.
The government is committed to making sure that we can't wait years for answers. We need to get on with any changes that are required.
It took Prime Minister Anthony Albanese 25 days to call a federal royal commission into the December 14 terror attack at Bondi Beach, where two gunmen allegedly motivated by extremist Islamic ideology opened fire on a Hanukkah festival, killing 15 people and injuring dozens more. After 25 days, the chorus was too loud to ignore.
Today, I have asked that former High Court Justice, the Honourable Virginia Bell AC, to serve as the Commissioner.
The government now has one chance at redemption.
Dennis Shanahan is The Australian's national editor.
After 2 years of failure, what is now needed is a clear declaration of intent of what the government actually wants and what the Australian public actually needs. What we've seen is a government reluctant to actually declare clearly what it wants, what the principles are. It's obfuscated, it's delayed, it's deferred. And what we've seen since Bondi is a government that has resisted a Royal Commission, then caved in and called a Royal Commission. We saw a government that said it didn't want to recall Parliament and then recalled Parliament. And then it introduced legislation which was so flawed and fraught that the Prime Minister was forced into a second major backflip and said, oh no, sorry, we're going to change all of this because the only unity he had achieved was that people were unified against him. Greens, Coalition, Liberals, Nationals, religious leaders, Muslim leaders, Jewish leaders, they were all against this legislation. But the real issue here is that what the Australian public wants, even more than some attempt to create a major front against anti-Semitism, is a real investigation into how the Bondi massacre happened, what could have been done to prevent it, and what can be done to prevent another one. What we need over the next 2 days of parliamentary sitting is a clear intention, a declaration of intention from the government. We want all the interagency cooperation to be investigated. We want ASIO, the AFP, the state police, all to be looked into to see what they knew and when. The reality is we'll never be able to stop terror attacks, but we should be able to reduce them, and that's what we've got to do now.
The security inquiry led by former ASIO boss and respected foreign affairs expert Dennis Richardson will go ahead as part of the Royal Commission, but without the teeth.
It's important to recognise here, Dennis Richardson does not have the powers of a Royal Commissioner. He cannot coerce witnesses into giving evidence. If the head of ASIO, for instance, and I'm not suggesting he is, but if the head of ASIO were to stall Dennis Richardson on questions about the involvement, the priorities of ASIO, Dennis Richardson in himself cannot say, okay, listen, Mike, you get down to it here and you do as I say. Dennis Richardson then has to go to Virginia Bell, write a letter, Dear Virginia, what I want is for you to tell ASIO to cooperate with me. Now, the Royal Commissioner, Virginia Bell, doesn't have to actually do that. But the look, imagine this, the look for a departmental head, a minister, somebody who says to Dennis Richardson, no, I'm not going to give you what you want. And he then has to go to get the Royal Commission to give that power. So that's a bad news for them in a political sense. Secondly, Virginia Bell is not compelled to actually give Dennis Richardson that coercive power on a particular issue. She can say, no, look, I don't think that's not pertinent. It's then open to Dennis Richardson to then turn around and say, well, I think it is, and I'm out of here. A disaster. So what we're actually looking at here is, instead of clear powers ceded to Dennis Richardson, it's a series of practical measures that have to take place with coercive threats. Now, I'm not casting any aspersions whatsoever on Dennis Richardson or Mike Burgess or the head of the AFP or the head of the New South Wales Police. All I'm saying is these are things the public needs to be reassured will be addressed, and yet in the current circumstances, they are not necessarily. This is why we need the government to come out and say, we want full cooperation with Dennis Richardson. We want him to look at this, this and this, and we're not afraid where he does look, so that everyone can say, yes, this is a fair dinkum inquiry. Anti-Semitism aside, we want to ensure that Australia's domestic security is in the right hands and being handled correctly.
Coming up, why the PM's return to Parliament isn't going to plan. When MPs and senators return to Canberra today, they'll convene to debate legislation very different to what the government had intended. Labor had proposed a two-part omnibus bill geared towards curbing anti-Semitism and preventing another tragedy like Bondi. The first part focusing on gun reform and the second on Australia's hate speech laws. But the Coalition and the Greens weren't on board. Opposition leader Susan Lee said her party will progress an alternative approach.
These changes to legislation will tackle anti-Semitism head-on in education, the arts and society more broadly, and critically enshrine a definition of anti-Semitism in law.
Deputy Greens leader Marine Faruqi said her party will come to the table on gun laws, but won't back the government's proposed immigration and hate speech reforms.
This is a divisive and dangerous legislation which cannot be fixed.
And that put the government in a tight spot.
So we'll separate out the bills. The gun laws will be separate, and then the laws on hate crimes and migration will proceed, but we will not be proceeding with the racial vilification provisions because it's clear that that will not have support.
Here's Dennis Shanahan.
Well, it's self-evidently a shambolic mess. I don't think anyone can say it's not. The Prime Minister, of course, was trying to use politics. He was trying to use this omnibus bill, which was like an albatross around his neck, which was threatening to go down and drag him down with it. And yet he and his senior ministers, Penny Wong and Tony Burke, were defending the legislation up until Friday evening. They were saying, oh no, it's all the opposition's fault. But in fact, what they were doing and what they have been doing since, obviously, the October 7 attack is they have been playing politics. They have not addressed the whole issue of anti-Semitism, of security failures, of security cooperation, of growing fears in the community. We've seen graffiti attacks and fire bombings, control from overseas. How is this happening? And partly because the government has always played politics. And the omnibus bill was about driving a wedge between the coalition partners and forcing Susan Lee into a position where she would be seen to opposing the legislation she'd been calling for. And this is what they have done all along, is they have not grasped the gravitas of the security issue involved here, let alone the principle of anti-Semitism. They have not grasped the breadth and the depth of the security threat before Bondi and now since Bondi. All they have done is played politics, and that's why it turned into a shambolic mess on Saturday, legislation being split, legislation being withdrawn, and a terrible political outcome for the Prime Minister.
Dennis Shanahan is the Australian's national editor. For all the latest from Canberra and around the nation, visit theaustralian.com.au.